Welcome to another episode of the Product Coalition European Tour podcast series. I'm in the bonus tour city of Cardiff and I'm excited today to be joined by Rowan Whittington. Welcome, Rowan.
Hello.
Looking forward to chatting about why product managers shouldn't exist.
Controversial, I know.
Good title. Good title. Let's make sure we give some more value. It's not clickbait, I promise, for those jumping in and seeing the title. So first up, I want to give a big thanks to dopol.co for the introductions to all guests in Cardiff. Dopol is a global online survey provider that has recently switched to a pay-for-value model, meaning you can get started with their real-time multilingual and embeddable surveys for free today. Just go to dopol.co. That's DOOPOLL.co. Now, this tour and every single podcast episode is dedicated to raising awareness and support for the bushfire-affected communities and wildlife in Australia. If you do enjoy this episode or any of the podcast episodes, consider supporting the 3 causes that you can choose from over at bushfire.productcoalition.com. Now, I'm visiting 5 cities across Europe to interview over 50 product leaders like Rowan here to gain insights, knowledge and experience to share with you, the Product Coalition global community. And if you've just discovered the Product Coalition, welcome. We're a global product community of 500,000 readers, 6,000 Slack members and thousands of podcast listeners. Before we get stuck into the episode, I do need to give a thanks to some brands and individuals that have been significant donors to the cause. First up is UserPilot, which is a code-free user onboarding and adoption tool designed especially for product management teams. UserPilot helps to increase conversion, user retention rates and reduce churn by guiding new users to their first aha moment with interactive walkthroughs, contextual product tours and onboarding checklists. It allows product managers to build fully customizable, behavior-triggered in-app experiences with a simple visual editor. Go to userpilot.com to grab a demo and a free trial. Shobit Chug is a Google product manager and he helps product managers become product leaders and have careers they can be proud of. Go to intentionalproductmanager.com and sign up for Shobit's free class on the habits that turn product managers into exceptional product leaders and help them move through their careers fast. Product-led teams like Mixpanel and Flexport know that the best time to capture engagement is when a user is already inside the product. That's why they use Chameleon to drive feature adoption, build onboarding flows, and gather user feedback. You can give it a go at trychameleon.com/success. I'd also like to give a thanks to Rich Mironoff and Chris Miles for their donations. Okay, Ryan. Now we can chat.
Great.
But before we do talk about why product managers shouldn't exist, we have an icebreaker on the podcast. In Melbourne, it was a locals guide. Okay. In Sydney, it was a pub quiz.
Right.
In Cardiff and the European cities, I'm going a bit more local. I've localised it. So for here in Cardiff, the game is called Is It Welsh or Not?
Oh, no. Okay.
Are you born and bred Welsh,
no,
Cardiff?
Very much not Welsh. I like to pretend to be, but I'm not. I'm from the north of England.
Yeah. Okay. How long have you been in Cardiff?
8 years, but not long enough to know any Welsh.
Right. Okay. All right. We'll see how well you've integrated into Welsh society.
All
right. Now, sorry. Let me bring the right ones up here. Let's get going. So the first one's a product, and you need to identify: is it Welsh or not? And the product is the ATM.
Oh.
No.
No.
What makes you say no?
I don't think it's Welsh for a very rubbish reason that ATM in Welsh is not ATM. So I feel like if it was made in Wales, then they wouldn't change the name.
Yeah,
that is also a pretty spurious reasoning.
Well, you'd be right. Yes. It's Scottish, in fact.
Okay.
In 1966, a Scotsman by the name of James Goodfellow from Paisley on the west coast of Scotland invented the first automated telemachine and PIN number system. I'd love to see a photo of it. But yeah, there you go. Next up, is it Welsh or not? And it's not really a product, to be honest. But I was scraping the barrel, digging around it in these different
in the Welsh language. I thought you were going to say Welsh words at me, and I was going to be expected to know. There's lots of consonants. It's probably Welsh.
Very true. So we've got the plus sign. You know, in maths, you got plus. Was that invented in Wales or not?
No.
Why not?
I think that maths is, Roman and Latin and all sorts of stuff.
Okay.
I don't really think of the UK or Wales or England as being particularly leading in that area. So I'm going to go,
written down.
no.
Yeah.
No.
You'd be wrong. Apparently both the plus and the equal signs in maths are both down to a Welshman called Robert Record from Tenby in South Wales, who in 1557 changed the then standard equal sign, which looked like two capital I's standing up next to each other. He turned them on their side 90 degrees, and that's the equal sign we're all familiar with today.
Very innovative.
There we go. All right, we do have a Welsh language test. So, aim of the game here is you've got to tell me whether it's a Welsh word or whether I made it up this morning.
Okay.
All right. The first one is the good old-fashioned Pilipala.
How do you spell it?
Pil I Pala.
Sure. Sounds Welsh.
You'd be right.
Okay.
What's it mean?
No idea. No idea.
A pilipata. A pilipala is a butterfly.
Oh, because of how it flaps its wings.
You could imagine that, yeah.
Sure.
It sounds like a little pilipala.
Lovely.
Floating in the wind.
Caterpillar, but not.
Yeah. Right, the next one then is a Bougainbrayan.
No.
Not Welsh?
No.
You think I made it up?
Yeah. That does sound like the sort of thing that you might make up.
A Bougainbrayan is a scarecrow in Welsh. That's my trusty friend, the internet. I'm going right here.
Okay.
There we go.
All right.
There you go. In 8 years, you can now start dropping butterfly and Bougainbrayan.
It's not Poppy Ping, though. I thought you were going to lead with that.
You're the second person.
That's the only
who's
one we
brought that
know.
up, so we've stayed well clear of that.
Hoffy Coffee.
What's a Hoffy Coffee?
I like coffee. You like coffee?
Hoffy Coffee.
Hoffy Coffee.
Sure, that's not off Ali G's show from like 20 years ago. He said something like
I really don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's also actually Welsh.
All right, okay, let's get stuck into the topic. So, why product managers shouldn't exist. So, first of all, why this topic title? Why did this one resonate with you?
So, there's a couple of reasons.
Right.
I think that often people fall into product management. I definitely did. And a lot of people who are product managers are often being given the ill-fated task of trying to get everybody to pay attention to the product and the customer and what people might actually want. And in my opinion, in lots of places, people are basically just outsourcing that. They're saying, I don't want to have to think about it, let's get a product manager in. But then they're not giving that product manager any space to do anything. They're not letting them achieve anything. And they're basically going, this is not my problem anymore. I've asked somebody else to deal with it. Right. So in a really product-centric or a tech-centric or a user-centric company, product management is amazing and can be super productive if it's given its proper credence. But I often find that product is a bit of a thankless task, and it's basically refereeing everybody else's ideas and plans, and nobody necessarily wants to have to talk about product. So it's almost going, I'm going to take that off my plate and give it to somebody else.
Right, okay.
And then when it's on somebody else's plate, it's not my problem anymore, so I can stop worrying about it.
Right. Nice
so I
angle.
think it's a bit of a lazy... I think the original idea of a product manager was probably a little bit of a laziness from other business leaders who go, I don't want to have to think about this anymore. People keep telling me I have to think about user experience and what the customer wants. So we'll just get someone else to do it, and then I can stop worrying about it.
Right, okay. So what's been your entry into product? You said you fell into it. Can you tell us a little bit about your context? How did you get into product?
That's a great question. So about 5 years ago, I joined the Admiral Group. So Admiral is a big insurer. They're just over the road on a graduate scheme, which was amazing. They've got an amazing graduate scheme. You kind of cycle through all sorts of different areas of the business. You can learn about marketing or product or claims or any of that. And they're an amazing company to work for. But what they're trying to do is give you a bit of a flavour of everything. So you can say, you get to your end of your 18 months and say, okay, I actually really liked that. I want to go into marketing, or I want to go into this thing. And what I found was that being a bit of a jack of all trades and a master of none, I was almost a useful person that was just put towards things. Oh, we need to do this. Rowan, can you come and help? Oh, you need to do this. Can you come and help? Because I don't think anybody necessarily sits on the graduate scheme and goes, I really want to be a product manager.
Right.
Maybe 5 years ago they didn't. Yeah, I think now it's much more of a hot term, and people do know what it is, and we've got podcasts and books and all sorts of stuff. But 5 years ago, you search for product manager and basically it came up with production manager and do you want to work in a factory?
Yeah, right.
So it's still becoming a thing. So I was on the grad scheme and I started working with my ex-manager who's amazing, bright, sparky brain, got loads of ideas, but needed somebody to kind of help him actually deliver on some of the ideas that he had. So essentially, hey, I've got a load of ideas, let's get someone to do the product stuff to actually get it done. I was very lucky that he is very product-centric as well. And I say very lucky, sometimes that meant that I said, well, you drive, if you know what you want to do, you do it. So there was sometimes a little bit of clashing of heads, but generally, I essentially got to build a product. I got to kind of, within 7 weeks, we went from zero to hero on a brand new concept for Admiral. Right. We worked with an external agency who were amazing, who taught me a lot about agile processes and scrum processes and, you know, what's useful and what's not useful in design. So basically I got thrown in at the deep end. Here you go and launch this thing. And don't spend too much money whilst you're at it. Right. And then we grew. So there were the two of us about 3-4 years ago, and now there's a company of about 55 plus. They're called Vago at Admiral. So I essentially said, well, hang on, I'm the product manager here, and I've got 2 products, 3 products, 4 products. I need to bring in more people. Let me train them. Let me give them product owner jobs or product manager jobs, and essentially found myself being able to be the head of product for a really cool startup funded by a big FTSE 100 company. So I had to learn really quick. Yeah, I went to a lot of conferences. I asked a lot of people a lot of questions. I read a lot of books. And I still don't think I'm, you know, I like the idea of being a product leader, but I don't think that's the case. I think I'm still learning, and we always are. But back to the kind of topic, I don't think I should have had to, product. The idea of product made sense because we just needed a job title for it. But actually, it was just a business. We were just running a business. And I could have been the head of operations. I could have been the head of marketing. It's actually just a mindset, and it's a skill set rather than an actual job. And I think that's one of the things that makes product so hard to explain, because in all different companies, we treat it differently, right? In marketing, you know, I've worked with a company who product sits in marketing. They say, oh, well, the website's mine, the quote engine's mine, optimization's mine. I've worked where an app is owned by the tech team and there's nobody who cares about it other than the tech team. So I think product kind of falls into the gaps between where other people don't want to be. So that's kind of my experience of product. And I've always struggled with being the person in the room who's supposed to represent product, because it is like being a referee, and it can be quite tiring. So I've moved now. I now work for Confused.com, who are a wonderful price comparison website based in Cardiff as well. And I now run the car shopping stuff, so car finance, car valuations, if you want to buy a car, sell a car, basically anything that you might be needing a tool for when you're purchasing a new car. And that's where I am. So I'm the head of that, which essentially means I now look at commercial and product and tech and marketing. So all of those different areas fall into my remit, which means I'm not really product anymore, although I am still a product person. I've got a product manager on my team who's amazing. So I think for me, product managers shouldn't exist, but if you want to give people a springboard into allowing them access to all of the business and learn loads of stuff about loads of different things all in one go, call it a product manager if you like, call it a project manager if you want, call it a business development executive, it doesn't matter. But I think that the idea of product can sometimes be quite negative for some companies.
Right. Interesting. It's great to hear that context. It does make a difference.
Yes.
I think. So this type of statement could undermine or could scare many product managers listening. Why do you think they might react that way to this type of statement?
Because it's basically saying that I think the statement can imply that product managers aren't important. And I think they are important, but for me, a good product manager should be trying to work themselves out of being needed. As a leader and as a product-focused person, you should be trying to encourage everybody else in your company to do that as well. You should get to the point where you say, do you know what, you don't need my skills anymore. I have imbibed everybody here with the idea of being product-centric. You can have a project manager, or you can have a product owner, or you can have you can have someone whose responsibility it is to look after the product, But in a well-oiled machine, really a product manager's job shouldn't be as necessary.
Right.
So I would see that podcast title and I would say, hey, I've made my money out of being a product manager. How dare you say that they're not important? And I'm not saying that they're not important. What I'm saying is that I think that for people who are not in product, they are often seen as a scapegoat. They are seen as a way of saying, oh, well, product did that, not us. People don't take responsibility for their businesses. And actually, 90% of businesses with a product person, the business that they're selling is the product. So in a perfect world, maybe the CEO would be the product manager, but they haven't got the time. So they delegate it out, and then that person has to fight with their peers for resource and time and energy and focus, when actually without the product, you don't have a company. So I almost think that for me, as a product person, I think my job will be done when I can move on and say, great, this team knows what they're doing. They're on it. They're focused. They think about the customer. They're building things that are useful. They're using design thinking. They're going through proper processes. They're actually using, their brains and actually considering it not just from a numbers game and not just from what's easiest. They are talking to people and they're building products that people love. I think it's a black hat title, if you will. It's, hey, come and listen to somebody who almost certainly makes their money out of being in product and say why it shouldn't exist. Of course it should exist, but it shouldn't have to.
Yeah. I can imagine in a multi-sided product like Confused, where you've got that commercial side, you've got partners. So for the audience listening that isn't from the UK, it's an online insurance broker or finance broker.
So it's a price comparison
well?
website,
right.
Which means that anything that you might want to compare prices for, so let's say energy, home insurance, life insurance, motor insurance, horse box insurance, motorbikes, vans, car finance, basically anything that you think, credit cards, you think, I want to go on the website, I want to go online and I want somebody to put all of my options in front of me. That's what Confused.com does. So Confused.com is nearly 18 years old. It was the first price comparison website in, I want to say in the world. It's definitely in the UK. Should have done my prep. But yeah, Confused.com was market leading and very, very innovative at the time and said, hey, people don't want to have to phone 20 different insurance companies. They want to be able to go to one place and see all the prices in one. So traditionally it has been quite insurance focused, right. But it's really branched out to being basically compare anything. Right. So you go to us or any of our competitors and we've got quite a wide product suite. Right. And then we then send you off to the person who can give you the best price, and then you purchase with them and you become their customer. Right.
So you've got two sides to this. You've got
lots of customers.
Negotiate a price per click or a commission share or whatever, and then you've also got to go and get the general consumer in and say what a fabulous marketplace and optimise the experience for them. With a product that's got completely different problems and solutions, I imagine, involved in it, without a product manager, where would the vision and strategy be executed if a product person wasn't there leading it? Do you think it could be completely autonomous? Or will it always need someone?
I think somebody does need to own the vision and somebody does need to own the strategy. But I actually really like the way that Confused.com does it. I like the fact that I am the head of an area. So I'm responsible for the numbers, the volumes, the marketing, all of those things for, 5-6 products. I'm not a product person. Well, I am, but we're not all product people. But essentially, we're responsible for the product vision. So my job title doesn't have product manager in it. I am given the space and autonomy to make my own decisions, and they can be both business conscious and customer conscious. And then within that, I can deliver that how I want to. So I'm not a product manager, but I am being given the autonomy to make decisions. I am essentially owning the product vision. I could have in my team a product manager, or I could have a project manager, or I could have a designer, or I could have a UX designer. The job title doesn't really matter. But I think that having product managers, people often don't give them the seniority that they might need to be able to get the things that they need to do done. So almost having maybe head of product, I would recommend heads of products or chief product officers who can really carry the vision, or principal product managers, or any of those sorts of things. And then they can inspire everybody else to get behind it. Almost like a mini CEO, I think, is much more useful. Whereas a product manager or a more junior product person often is having to fight for a seat at the table, and I don't think that's fair.
Right.
I don't think it's fair to expect people to be able to, and I'm speaking from a large business angle or from a kind of medium-sized business. I think if you give product the respect it needs, then it's perfect. But if you aren't, and you're just expecting somebody to be able to make a change, I think it's unfair, and everybody should take more responsibility for the product.
For those that are looking to unlock this product mindset, let's call it, instead of applying and getting a job in product, particularly with your experience going through a graduate scheme, what would you suggest for them to do to build up thinking more like a product manager, so that they can act more like a product manager, even if the job title didn't exist?
For me, I think the most important skills that a product person, whether it's, job titles aside, should be trying to build are communication, creativity and collaboration. So if you can't get your ideas across to people, and if you are not able to listen to other people, you can't work in product. You can't have one person's opinion being the only opinion, the highest paid person's opinion in the room, the hippos, the zebras, the whichever acronym you want to use. So communicating is really key, and being humble in that communication. So if somebody comes to you and they prove to you that the thing you're trying to do is wrong, you have to go, great, thank you so much for sharing with me. And that's where collaboration comes in. So you're not always going to be the person who knows, but you are always the person who has to make that decision, and you have to lean on your peers. You have to be able to listen to people. You have to want to listen to people. And you have to be able to get people inspired to want to be a part of your project team. So if they've got other day jobs, you often get people assigned to you who can give you maybe 3 hours a week. If you're trying to inspire them, you need to make sure that that they want to work with you, so they want to collaborate with you. And then creativity is also, to both of those points, sometimes you haven't got much time, so you have to make sure that what you're doing is useful, and maybe you want to think of it from a different angle. You think, oh, well, this is what I've been asked to do, but I'm not going to be able to do that in the 6 weeks that I've got, so how can I approach it in a more practical and pragmatic way? I think you've got to be creative in how you pretend to be other people. So almost you're putting a different person's hat on. Yep. The product that I want is not the product that you want. So when I'm sitting there trying to build for all these different people, I've got to put my hat on and say, right, I'm Jay now, and how would Jay approach this, and what would he do? Or I'm my grandma, or I'm this 50-year-old man who wants to drive a Mercedes-Benz, or I'm this 30-year-old woman who hasn't got time to be thinking about anything, and she's probably going to be doing this on her mobile, or I'm a 17-year-old who's never driven before. How am I going to cope with insurance? You've got to be able to be creative, and I think that's almost the drama of it. Right. So having gone through a graduate scheme was really helpful for me, because essentially I was being paid to do work experience. Yeah. What I delivered wasn't, it was of business value, but it was never on their roadmap. They never, the areas that I went to didn't know they were going to get me until a month previously. Right. So they can't rely on you. They're basically, oh, hello, nice to meet you. We can give you some interesting things to do, some interesting projects. So I got to speak to people. I got to ask them about their journey. I got to connect with them. I got to hear the pain points. And you get to speak with people from all different levels and all different areas. And I think that does make a product person, being able to really read the room and say, okay, well, that person's got a very loud voice, but what they're saying doesn't sound like it's actually that important. That person over there hasn't said anything yet, but so-and-so told me that actually they've been in the company for 20 years. So if I don't get their buy-in, then I'm going to have a problem. So how do you collaborate with that whole room, and what communication methods do you use to get your creative idea across? So those would be my top
lots of
top
soft
tips.
skills.
Lots of soft skills.
That's for me that's the combination of art and science of product management, and you can't go all in on the science or the technology. You've got to be able to do some of those things that you've been talking about, or if not all of those things that you were talking about.
Well, you've got to try. And if you can't do some of them, admit it. Just admit it and say, this is not my forte. Could somebody coach me, or could somebody else do that bit? You're never... I was going to say you're never alone in it. It's absolutely not true. I have almost always been alone in trying to get that first thing over the line, because you've got to prove it before they'll give you anybody else to actually help you. But you're not alone in having come up against that before. You can ask a community. You can speak to your community of practice within the same company or within the same city. I have a lot of respect for people in the product community who spend time kind of answering questions online. The forums are really interesting. There's a lot of really good books out there. if you can't do it, be honest about that, and play your strengths, but also go and deliberately try and work on it. I get a lot of people I've worked with over the years have said, well, do I need to be technical? Because we worked in a very, at Vago, it was a very, very technical, tech-led company. We were trying to build new things. We were using innovative tech. We were trying to be quick. We were doing, continuous delivery. Let's release every day. We were trying to be cool, but also creative. And my product owners would always say, should I learn to code? Or should I learn to, should I learn this? And my answer was almost exclusively, no, absolutely not. You're never going to be the person who knows that best. And as soon as you start to think you do, you're going to start to question things that you shouldn't. It's not your job to know. It's not your job to be able to question the technical solution. It's your job to facilitate that. And if it sounds ridiculous or if you've done it before, then feel free to comment and pipe up and say, hang on, last time we built this, it only took 2 days. Or last time we did that thing, it all went wrong. Are you sure we should do it that way? But it's not your job to know how to write that line of code. And by trying to learn that, you're undermining the people who are really skilled in that area. I don't go to a designer and say, this is what the design that I want. I go and say, I've got some ideas, but obviously you're the person who knows best. Let's work together on it. And I don't go to a tech team and say, this is the architecture I want. I'm happy to draw it with them and, do that workshop so that it happens, but it's not my job to do it. And I think as a product owner, product manager, that's one of the hardest things, not actually being responsible for any of it. You're inspiring other people to do it. So collaboration is super key.
Can I ask, how have you changed yourself from going from a graduate scheme, understanding the business and the functions, becoming a product manager, and then having to switch into this lead role now, which is, I can imagine a lot more, if I was to think about delivery and being head down, to now obviously looking ahead far greater, like anyone who moves up the career chain, you do have to think more strategically as you start to move forward. What's really changed for you in terms of when it comes to thinking about strategy and going beyond the product owner delivery role to get things done fast and quick, to actually thinking, how does this contribute to where we're trying to get to in 12 months or 24 months?
I think it's almost been a natural progression for me, right? Because it's had to be. Right. But I think the thing that has changed the most is my trust in other people. And that again sounds like another contentious podcast line. But essentially, when it was just me, I knew it was just me. And when I started to have more people in my team, I had to learn to let go and empower and not micromanage and all sorts of things. And I like to think I did that well, but then there was always someone above me who was asking me why things went wrong, and it was sometimes easier to just swoop in and fix it than teach my team and coach my team. And I think now I genuinely have to say, that's your area. I trust you. You make the decision, and I will happily stand in the way if someone comes to throw fire at you. It's my job to protect my team, to empower my team, and to give them the space to make the decisions they want. But I don't have the time, nor should I make the time, to go and read every single ticket, to go and double check every piece of copy, to go and review every single release before it happens. Yes, it was useful that I know how to do all those things and that I loved doing all those things. And I loved nothing better than being stuck in a room, not unlike this, with 3 developers going, this thing's broken, let's try and work out what's happening, let's try and recreate it. But my time is not there anymore. And I have to let other people do that. And for me, my old boss at Vago used to empower me to do that. Great. He would come and he'd say, what's the problem? And I would tell him what the problem was, and he would go, okay, well, what are we going to do about it? He very, very rarely undermined me and went to double check. And I think that's what I've learned in kind of coming more to strategy. Right. I have to give those people that time. And if it does go wrong, it is on my shoulders and it is my issue. So it's my responsibility to coach people and to give them the tools that they have. But if it goes wrong, it's not a blame game. So I think that's the biggest change for me. I used to be incredibly hands-on. And I used to, if someone come with a problem, I'd be like, yeah, I'm here. I can sit with you for 3 hours and we can work it through and I used every opportunity as a coaching opportunity, and I worked 60 hours a week. It was horrible.
Right.
It was lovely, but it was horrible. It was the best baptism of fire I could have asked for. And I know I've got the capacity to turn around and help people if I need to, but I also have to let them do it themselves. There's no, they're not going to learn, and they're not going to have the opportunities to take ownership and feel empowered and be like, that was my thing, I did that, that's cool. If I just always go and kind of swoop in and go, well, what about this and this and this? And then look into the future, I did very, very well to avoid a lot of that for a while, because my previous manager really loved the numbers. So I'll go, yeah, cool, you deal with them. I'll deal with the people and I'll deal with the product. You go and look at the numbers, because Excel makes me cry. Doesn't anymore. I'm quite good at it. But actually I quite like it. I quite like, it's storytelling. It's just storytelling. And I think as soon as you realise that, everything's easier. You take your product management skills of communicating and being creative and all sorts of stuff, and you say, right, well, basically I'm doing exactly the same thing, and now I'm trying to empower people to believe my story. And that's just a slight switch in how I'm applying the same skills. So I think being a product person is an excellent springboard to future leadership and to kind of guiding and helping people do things, whether that's a product person or the actual phrasing is to be debated, but I do think that the skills that product managers have should be very highly in demand.
Right. Can I ask, is there tactics you employ to try and uplift the mindset and the capability of your team or engineering, etc.? And what are they to help remove this concept of you being a product manager and to create the autonomy we were talking about earlier?
Yes and no. There's definitely things I've tried that haven't worked.
Right.
I used to do something that I'm sure irritated every single member of my team at the time, but hopefully it was helpful, is whenever somebody would ask me a question, my first response was, do you need to ask me that? Do you need to ask me that? Or could you ask anybody else that? Because I was very conscious that I was turning into a silo of knowledge.
Right.
And by saying, do you need to ask me that, often people will go, oh, no, actually, I could ask so-and-so, or I could go and check here, or I could do that. And that would encourage that self-research, if you will. So Rowan, where's this thing saved? Go and have a look. Don't ask me, because I might not always be here. But also, what are the rules and the logic behind this and this and this? I said, well, do you really need to ask me that, or do you think you could find that out yourself? So almost putting a blocker in place to stop me from becoming that central hub of knowledge, because I was that, because I did know those things. Yeah. So for those people to learn those things, they have to go and find out themselves rather than me just giving them the answer. So I think that has always been quite helpful. I did try to do kind of open training sessions. So sort of, pooling all of the things that people might want sessions on, and say, okay, well, once a week or once every 2 weeks, we'll get in a room for 2 hours and you can ask me all the questions you want and I'll come with some prepped stuff and we can talk through it. So almost giving that specific time and saying you've got product training and that will be happening. I think technically, so with engineers, one of the things that I have always found works incredibly well with working with engineers is asking them their opinion. I know, mind-blowing. Because they've always got better ideas than most people, some of the devs I've worked with over the years have been amazing. They've been the people who've said, well, why don't we do this? Or why don't we, we should have discount codes, or we should do this thing, or, well, if somebody cancels, then we should do this and this and this and this and this. They've got the ideas because they've been asked to do that thing millions of times. If you get a developer who's worked in 5 different e-commerce companies, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Go and say, well, what did they do in your old place? What worked well there? What did you build that time? And they're incredibly creative, and I think lots of people don't really take that into consideration. They think I need to write the ticket and it needs to have 10 bullet points on, and when I give it to them, they will do exactly what I ask them to do. But they won't, because there's all sorts of other things that you won't have thought of that they have to do. There's testing that they need to do that they will be able to do once they've built it. And also, you might not be right. Just as much as marketing is your stakeholder and design is your stakeholder, tech is your stakeholder as well. And again, as a product person, that's a nightmare, because you're in the middle of everybody saying, I want. But you should listen to the tech team, because they've got good ideas. And also, if it's their idea, I'm sure they will come to you with it, with telling you exactly how long it'll take, and that maybe they'll do it off the side of the desk. So I think coaching people is almost just trying to encourage people to know what they need coaching in, which is the hardest bit. You know, what are you struggling with? What do you need help with? What was the thing that took up all of your headspace yesterday? What are you worrying about? I went to a talk a couple of years ago, the CEO of Hello Alfred,
right.
I think she's called Marcella Sapone.
Right.
She's based in the States, and she was talking about an exercise that she used to do with her team, which I have since then always do, once a week or something with various different people, which is called 70-30. So you draw a circle,
right,
and then you put a pie, like a pie chart, and you do a 30% and a 70%. And the 70% is what you spent your week doing. So you write in that, you say, this is what I've spent the week doing. Emails, Slack messages, stand-ups, design workshops, writing a paper for an oversight or governance thing. And then you go into the little one and you say, well, what have you spent your week thinking about? And then at the end of that, you sit and you say, well, the things you're thinking about are the things that you think are the most important. Are they represented in what you're doing? So I would do this on a Friday afternoon with my team, and I'd say, okay, are they represented in what you're doing? No. Okay, then what you're going to do is you're going to go away with maximum 3 objectives for the next week to make some of those things that you're thinking about become reality. So moving it into your doing. So whether that's, I've been thinking a lot about how we could improve this process. Fine, book it in. Let's have an hours-long workshop next week. Book it in now. We've all agreed we're going to do it. That'll take it out of thinking and into doing. And I thought that was really useful, especially when people have got so many things going on. You just get so drudged in the day-to-day that people have got great ideas. But if you never give them the space to tell you they've got ideas, they're not... people don't make space for themselves because they're so conscious of delivering what they've been asked to deliver.
I like that. I like that, especially mixing it up with a retro, just to change the format a little bit and keep it fresh.
And doing product retros as well. So we do. Well, I don't anymore, but I used to do product retros with the product owners. So you do a retro with the developers and the product owner and the scrum master, and you go through that and you say, well, how did this sprint go? Also a weekly. How's your week gone? Right. What are the problems you've been having? You're, creating that community. If you've got 4 product owners, they should speak to each other just as much as your tech team do. But we don't need pair programming, and we don't need people to review our code. So you have to force it. Otherwise, again, being a product owner is really lonely. So trying to get people in the room to talk to each other is quite important.
Nice. Yeah. Like when I think about concepts like Scrum of Scrums and things like that, it's bringing people together, but to focus on delivery, not focus
it's all
on
delivery focused.
What's not delivery that you're working on or worried about or behind on or ahead of.
And getting into sprints for that is also helpful. So design sprints. So my old product design lead is amazing. He does design sprints. He was like, well, you work in sprints in engineering and product, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So that he could manage the work that came into his area, so that he could say, well, no, you didn't get it to me in time, so I'm not doing it. He almost, he saw the opportunity. He went, well, you're doing it like that. So if I do it like that, then I'm doing the same thing and we can talk the same language. Kind of bringing it out to all those things and having tickets for product ideas and all sorts of stuff, I think has been really helpful.
One of the heaviest weights on a product manager's shoulder is prioritization. If there wasn't any product managers, who would prioritize, do you think? And who would own that priority?
Again, in a perfect world, people would be able to understand each other's needs and come to a lovely collaborative answer. And I know that's never the case, but it's almost kind of what I said previously about the CEO or the person responsible for the whole thing. It's the CEO's responsibility to make sure that their C-suite or their heads of agree. And if their heads of agree, then their reports should agree. Then their reports should, there should be the ability to pass down a vision. So I am obviously very sarcastically saying you shouldn't have product managers because it's just not how the world works. It's just not how it works at all. But if you could rewrite the structure of a business, you would have your product vision as your company vision. And then everybody is working towards that. And you'd be able to say, well, we've justified it that we have 20% tech credit on every single sprint. That's technical work needs to be done because in order to keep the product going, so there's 20% every sprint. 80% is agreed amongst the senior management, and once it's agreed, you crack on. You know, you have to have trickle down and you have to have trickle up. You have to have the capacity for someone to have a great idea and for it to make its way into the scrum team, but you also have to have the capacity for the CEO to say, I want something and I've got reasons, and for it to trickle into a scrum team. So I almost think that prioritisation would be easier if everybody was singing from the same hymn sheet, and everybody's not singing from the same hymn sheet because they're all outsourcing that shared hymn sheet to one person. They're saying, oh, well, the product manager deals with that bit. I'm worrying about my metrics. My metrics don't have anything to do with product. My metrics are pure cash, or my metrics are, how many bugs we've got live in the system. Those aren't product KPIs. If everybody had product KPIs in their area, prioritisation would be less of a bloodbath.
Obviously, the personal incentives as well influence prioritisation, and that's where I've seen conflict as well. Why one thing goes above another can depend on which stakeholders influenced the most by their own either short or long-term incentives.
Yeah, but I almost, and this is a very, very contentious thing to say, and it's not what I would actually be advocating for, but again, if you're the leader of a company, if you're the CEO, and you can't get your team to agree, then that's your problem. You know, you should be arbitrating. You should be in the room trying to ensure that people are listening to one another. You should be encouraging a good collaboration between your team. And if you're not, because you're saying, oh, well, those who manage to make their way out of that bloodbath win, that's not good leadership. And essentially then you are delegating having to referee that match to somebody else because you can't be bothered. And I think you shouldn't be responsible for a company if you can't take the responsibility of actually managing and looking after your people so that they don't have to have personal incentives and they can feel appreciated and that, you know, the last thing they should be doing is going and saying, oh, I haven't been able to get this thing done because somebody else has got their thing done, and the CEO saying, well, that's not acceptable. You know, they should say, yes, I know that, because I've agreed that other person should do that thing. Thank you for letting me know. We're on it. You know, that visibility only comes from having prioritisation being important. And if it's all the way down in backlog session, of course it's not.
And where everyone's got buy-in then of that prioritised backlog. And for me, it's always a telltale sign if a product manager feels they truly own prioritisation, they own the backlog and it's theirs, and they can do what they want with it. It's not a good sign either of the product manager or the culture that they're in that's forced them into that position, as opposed to being quite comfortable sharing the baby and letting the village raise the baby instead of...
And exactly that metaphor. It takes a village, right? And if you're just saying that it's one person's responsibility, it doesn't happen. And that is a wonderful, thank you. I'm going to take that metaphor away with me. I love a metaphor. That metaphor is perfect. The idea that, oh, well, we'll just make one person the town crier and it'll all just get done. That's absolutely not what happens. Yeah. So having a product manager doesn't work. Get everybody on the same page and take responsibility for your product, because as a CEO, you've got a product. Or you think you have anyway. You know, you're trying to make someone give you money for something or not give you money for it. You know, you're trying to get somebody to use something that you've put out into the world. That's your job as a CEO.
Thanks so much, Rowan.
All right, thank you very much for having me.
Great
Sorry
to talk through and think through
rude.
all of this. No,
Sorry
it's
been rude about product.
Pleasure.
I do love it, I promise.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. It's been good fun. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode and any of the episodes from the Product Coalition European Tour podcast series. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of the other episodes, please consider showing your support for the bushfire affected communities, wildlife and volunteer firefighters in Australia who have had a hard time in recent months. You can do so by heading over to bushfire.productcoalition.com. Thanks again, Rowan.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.